Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast inside the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And today, I have somebody that's definitely doing some work in the community, doing some work in the city, doing what many people talk about. But this brother is like us, representing for community, connecting a lot of different things. His story is dynamic, unique, and I didn't even want to blow the load because I just know bits and pieces. Chase Cantrell, how you feeling today, my brother?
What up, though? I'm feeling good.
Everything's cool. So we're going to start this like we start a usual Detroit is Different.
Mm-hmm.
Your Detroit story. What brought your family to Detroit City?
So my parents came to Detroit in 1968, and I didn't understand this until I was an adult. When I began to realize, wait a minute, this is a year after the rebellion. Mm-hmm. All my family's from Ohio, so like Mansfield, Ohio, around there.
Yeah,
the farmland around Mansfield, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand. I'm just like, wait a minute. So the story that I've been told, is, Detroit aflame, right, in 1967. They were in their early 20s. Like, what brings early 20-somethings from Ohio up to Detroit? But there was still a lot of economic opportunity. Like, both of my parents in their early 20s, young black folk, got good jobs in downtown Detroit. And they were like, Detroit was still bustling. Like, the area where the rebellion happened was pretty small. Like, that didn't seem to affect the rest of the city at that point. So my dad was working downtown, then on the boulevard. My mom was working for a bank. Like, they came up for opportunity. So, like, that's not the story a lot of us get about Detroit, but that's what brought my family here.
Okay, and being that they came in the late 60s, close to 70, that is very unique because so many families were already, made the, I guess, migration, but in the grand scheme of things, it had been like two. So that Ohio community,
right?
I'm guessing, do you still have family roots there?
Oh yeah, like my parents were the only ones who left. So all of my aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, all in Ohio. So
okay, down 75.
Yep.
Okay, what when you say more opportunity, what was different, do you think, about your mother and father that made them want to make the leap and come to Detroit as opposed to stay in the hometown with their family?
So I think part of it was the military. So my dad was in the Army. Okay. I think, he was based in St. Louis, living in East St. Louis, and they, have great stories from that period. But my understanding was there was a job there, after the Army that then led my father to Detroit. So there was an opportunity. Like, he worked in retail at that time, and he got a management position, which for a young black man was pretty rare. So came to Detroit, got a chance to manage rather large stores. Again, like, he was probably 22, 23, and just, moved up the chain from there. So it really was that economic opportunity.
So you spoke also to him being in the military, Army, late 60s, puts him right in the mix of Vietnam's conflict. Did he serve?
He was serving in the Army, but he didn't get deployed overseas. So he was stationed on the U.S. side, which I think was lucky for me, actually, lucky for my family in general, because I know I have uncles who went over. And, as many of us see in our families, like, there were real impacts to people who served in that war overseas. Like, folks came back different. So I'm pretty thankful for the experience that he got and that he got to stay pretty close to home. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then you said your mom worked at a bank.
So my mom ended up working what at the time was NBD. NBD became like first Chicago NBD, then Bank One, then JP Morgan Chase. So she went through all those iterations. She worked there for like 35 years.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. So yeah, and we remember National Bank of Detroit, and just being in that space. So finance has been something you've seen, or had at least some perspective of.
A little bit. I don't know that my mom talked that much about it growing up, but yes, a bank was not an odd place for me, right? Like even in 6th grade, NBD came into my school, into my middle school, and they set up like savings accounts for kids. So I got to be one of the, I guess, like loan officers, like one of the kid loan officers to help set up accounts. So like to me, finance wasn't a weird thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
They was like, yo, man, I need some money for some Jordans. And it's like, no, that is not a sound.
It's not the way you do it.
But it's like, no, these are the 7s. Somebody writing Chase as a kid, like, if I would have had the J's, then stock X.
Listen, right. Now it's an investment.
It would have been, I would have $30,000. Thank you, Chase.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, 4th grade loan officer.
There we go.
Like, these is an investment, mama. So I'm joking, but for my older audience right now, shoes have become somewhat of an investment. Sneakers. So in this same space, neighborhood. What was the neighborhood?
Yes, I grew up at Puritan and Greenfield.
Oh, okay.
Which in the 80s, I guess a lot of Detroit was kind of rough, but like, you know, it was a fairly middle income neighborhood. And when I look at it now compared to other neighborhoods, it's still intact. Right, wasn't a whole lot of demolition. There's not a whole lot of vacancy in the neighborhood still, but you know, I remember like recently a friend of mine black guy from Ypsilanti, recently moved to Detroit with his wife. He has kids now, and he mentioned to me, he's like his young son, who's like 2 or 3, is reacting to gunshots at night, like in the neighborhood. And my first impulse, and I feel terrible that this was my first impulse, he asked me, was this normal? And I'm like, yeah, that's normal, right? That's Detroit. And it makes me realize, like, yeah, that was my youth, right? There's a lot of us growing up, like, still to this day. But that's the kind of neighborhood it was, right? Like, I lived right in front of a park, like the kind of stuff that happened in that park at night, you know? So I was pretty sheltered. So again, thanking my parents for this. Like, I didn't know all the stuff that was happening in my neighborhood as a kid. But looking back on, you know, my parents would only let me ride my bike within, you know, a certain distance, you know, couldn't just be in anybody's house, couldn't go to the park unaccompanied. As a kid, I'm just like, man, like, this is messed up. But as an adult, I'm like, yes, this all makes sense now.
And that's when I think of those cross streets, I immediately think of Cooley High School.
Yeah, my brother went to Cooley.
I think of Justin's Records. I think of it's completely different now. Red Devil Inn.
Red Devil, yeah, yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Finkel.
Like, these are like some of the things that just come to mind when I think of that community. And I had an aunt that lived like off Marlowe in that neighborhood, basically, like kind of down the street from Cooley, and you know, Tyrone the Wheatley family being in sort of that neighborhood and what that is. So it's a what's the even the middle school, Cerveny?
Yeah, there's Cerveny and Crary. And yeah, what's interesting, and I think this is a Detroit story for a lot of people. I mean, Cerveny doesn't exist anymore. No. Cooley doesn't exist anymore. No. And Crary, I think, is like an adult education facility, but it certainly isn't like a school for children. So like these schools, I mean, the facility still exists, but like the history and our histories almost feel like they're erased. Like these institutions are no longer there. My sister went to Redford, a little further up, but I mean, they tore that down to create a Meyer. So just like all of our history of growing up, it's just, yeah, they're just memories now.
And being in that, and you said yes, it definitely was some working class folks, but it was definitely still some, as we say, like it was still some street element there as well. But as you said, the way that your parents, you know, made sure you were safe, and still were able to raise you up, raise a family, period. What do you, when you think of that time in that neighborhood, just being a kid, what stands out? What are some of the things that come to mind for you?
I mean, there were other kids on the block. So, I mean, just the community of children that existed where I grew up. I mean, my brother used to play basketball, and so my siblings are older. Like my sister's 8 years older, my brother's 12 years older. But like my brother would be at the park playing basketball all the time. There was a basketball rim there. There no longer is. Like the playground looks nicer than when I was growing up, but you no longer can play basketball in the park.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As a kid, it just felt like a normal Detroit childhood, right? Just running up and down the street, bicycling. Like again, I couldn't go to the park unaccompanied, but I would go with my brother, right? So no, it was just it felt pretty carefree, structured, right? But still pretty carefree.
Okay, and you speak of carefree, structured, and that's one of those like pillar what I think of West Side communities, because I remember my aunt was a nurse, a RN at Providence, so she, usually, that's not that far away,
right?
But even next door were like plant workers, and then like across the street were people that worked like in kitchens and stuff like that. It was definitely more of a working class community. I remember through the 80s of what I remember, and definitely through certain points to the 90s, maybe around like 98, 97, when my aunt was considering moving. She made a move in like 2001. Things were shifting. Like you clearly saw from that block families that were there for like generations, because that was the other thing about over there. It was like those people seemed like they were there for like eons, and things shifted. And
it wasn't just that neighborhood. That is a good symbolic neighborhood for what happened. But I mean, we talk about white flight a lot, right? 1950s automotive plants start to shift to the suburbs. White people follow for a lot of different reasons, including racism. But black flight started in the 1990s, right? Like if you had resources, I mean, this is why, like I jokingly used to say that Southfield was like Detroit North, but like people would move to Southfield and now further out to Farmington and Bloomfield, et cetera. Like if you have resources, you're moving. And that was the 1990s, the mid 90s. And I remember my parents looking for new homes in the suburbs. They never moved. Like they've been in Detroit all my life, but I do remember that they had begun. They were considering it. Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of parents were,
and it did become that. Yeah, definitely. Oak Park, Southfield, Lathrop Village. As you said, Farmington. I mean, right now, people, I got homies in like Novi. Levant, like places where it's just like, as a black person, it's like, hey, more power to you for that journey.
Well, for me, I mean, we've lost the black middle class, most of the black middle class in Detroit. And if you want to have a strong black city, you have to have a middle class. You have to have a strong middle class. So for me, there's that liberty for black people to move. Like people, like you're saying, people feel comfortable in other communities. But what does that mean for the black city? What does that mean for Detroit? And I think that it has a real impact on what we can actually build and what we have power over. If we don't have, honestly, we don't have the resources, the capital of those people who, in quotation marks, have succeeded, right? And success shouldn't be leaving the city. But I think a lot of us, hell, like I grew up hearing and understanding that once you succeed, you have to leave.
Yeah, the whole concept of leaving the hood.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do as a pillar of success is key.
Yep.
And being in a neighborhood like this, similar. Yes, you're right. Like the whole concept, I don't think I've ever coined it as black flight, but what you're saying is definitely real. A lot of those attributes of success, what it would be looked like, was definitely leaving Detroit and heading to a suburb, which I believe for black folks comes with its own set of...
There are problems there too.
Exactly. A different set of challenges.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So now, it shifts. So in that shift, as you were looking at that, did you see many of your friends that you grew up with leave the neighborhood, your block?
Actually, yes. I guess I haven't really thought that much about it, but yeah, when I was in my preteens, a lot of folks began to move to Southfield and Oak Park, etc. Yeah.
So And then in this, and I'm hinting towards and going towards something, we see what was in my mind, like not even my mind, just in America, one of the largest blocks of home ownership of Detroit.
A black home ownership.
Black home ownership.
Yeah.
Transition to today, where you have almost like a full renter class of like you know of black folks in this black city. So it because it was so commonplace in the 80s to own a home if you were black in Detroit.
It was, and part of it. So to go back to the 70s for a second, like when my parents first got here. So 1970 or 71, my parents bought a house. But they were able to go to Standard Federal, which eventually became like LaSalle Bank, then Bank of America. They went to Standard Federal and they got a mortgage, right, for a $21,000 house, which is probably in today's dollars like $100K. But young, black, in their 20s, gainfully employed, right, but like 20-somethings, able to go into a bank and get a mortgage. We are unable to do that today. In the same ways. I
want to unpack that big time. And I'm going to put like a pin in that.
Sure.
And then we're going to go to more of just your Detroit story.
Yeah.
School for you. Where were you going to school?
Yeah, so Crary. Did a short stint in Catholic school for middle school. So St. Scholastica, still close to the neighborhood, right? Got a scholarship to Benedictine for my 9th grade year, which was not as good as St. Scholastica. So when it came time, when that scholarship was up, my parents were like, nah, we're going to a public magnet. So I took the test, got placed at Cass, which is like on the other side of the city. And we're like, nah, like Renaissance is right there. It's a mile away from my house. So my parents went up to Renaissance and we talked to the principal, like, I'm going here. So it worked. Yeah.
Okay. And were you at the new or old?
I was at the old Renaissance.
So the old Renaissance had a different feel. And I know my Phoenix that are watching are like, you know, it was very familial. Like almost like a, you know, everybody felt a part of something.
And everybody knew everybody. I mean, it was a small school, right? Like 700 give or take students. So everybody knew everybody. Like the teachers knew the students like very, very well. Parents were really involved. Like it was a different feel completely.
What did you think of your experience there at Renaissance?
It was a little weird because I came in 10th grade, right? So transferring from Benny. But so in a way I had to like, you know how all of those how the social norms sort of form in 9th grade. So I had to find my place once I got there in 10th. But no, once I got into the groove of it and found that friend circle, no, everything turned out really well. Like I enjoyed my teachers. I enjoyed it was a rigorous curriculum. It prepared me for U of M later. So no, it was a good experience.
So it was like you went in 10th grade, like you started at this lunch table, like, I ain't really cool with them. Then you went to that lunch table, like, they kind of cool. And then you was like, okay, this is where I'm at.
It actually was the folks who wanted to hang out in certain teachers' rooms during lunch. So not even going to the lunchroom. It's like, no, we're going to Mr. Sanchez's room. Like it was that clique. So yeah.
Oh, so like even a step above, like so it's like, Mr. Sanchez, I don't even want to trade you this chocolate milk. Could you please give me some of your lunch options?
There we go.
So, and then from that journey on to U of M, which is unique because it's just like, I don't know what started this relationship between so many Renaissance students going to U of M and so many Cass Tech students going to MSU. It's just, I mean, it
part
mixes,
of it,
but it
was the recruitment.
It's a connection.
It was the recruitment. I mean, it almost felt like there were no options. Like you knew that you were expected to go to U of M or MSU, right? And I only applied to those two schools and then one out-of-state school. But like the recruiters recruiting hard. Like U of M was coming in all the time. MSU was coming in. I did a preview weekend at State, and I mean between the two, I got into both, and I don't know. I guess Michigan went out, but like. You knew going in that was the expectation, and there was usually some scholarship dollars attached. So
now, me me knowing like we're close in age, though I got you by a couple, that puts you in space at U of M at a time when we have so much about affirmative action stirring up. So much on that campus, and this is one of those things where and you're a Wolverine here. I'm talking to you as a Wolverine, and I'm talking to you Wolverines that are right now like, it wasn't us, it was the Republicans. And it's so unique about that institution, because I remember I did a TED talk at U of M for a group, and as I was giving my TED talk about like progressive thought and progressive theory, this may have been in 2016.
Okay.
As I was giving my TED talk, Richard Spencer was speaking, or no, not Richard Spencer, Sean Spencer was speaking like down the hall. I'm like, you realize that this institution, and it's a unique place because it's like some of the most leading ideas in, I guess, like liberal progressivism come from U of M, but also still some of the most leading conservative Republican doctrine come in that institution as well.
Free speech is important.
It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Gerald Ford, it's a reason, you know what I'm saying? Like anchored in like in these thought processes. It's like, you know, y'all can kind of walk across the hall and maybe even have a discussion between like each other and hash out some of this stuff.
Well, what's interesting, I mean, so I went to the law school as well, so that was my grad degree, and the Federalist Society is there, and just, I mean, as you said, you could go across the hall and hear what other people are thinking, and sort of sit in your own discomfort. But it was, Michigan attracts all types. But on the affirmative action piece, 2006, Michigan passed Prop 2, right? Like outlawing race considerations in university admissions and a lot of other things. But I was approached by the ACLU as a student, and they just wanted to know if I would be a plaintiff in the case to sue to keep race-based admissions at U of M. I said yes. They heard my backstory, so all the Renaissance, all the everything I just said, and they were like, "Would you become the lead plaintiff?" So this went all the way to the Supreme Court. So if people want to Google Cantrell v. Granholm, like it started there.
Wow, I see the stuff you learned. I'm just timing out thinking this that you be in that mix.
Yeah, totally.
But wow.
But it was random. Like there was an email that went out to law students. I think it was to the Black Law Students Alliance, to BLSA, looking for volunteers to be a part of the case. I responded, met at a coffee shop with one of the ACLU reps, and it just went from there. So
now I really want to open this up because as much as I'm speaking to U of M, and then also as a Fab Five fan, I always thought U of M came down hard on them too. So it's just like, stick it to them. I'm a Walsh guy, but people know if it's state or Michigan, to me it's two sides of the same coin in the grand scheme of things. But Prop 2 was tough for me because you know, baby sister from a U of M grad, a lot of people I know that went to U of M, and it was like for them to move forward on this Prop 2 thing, but then you walk that damn Ann Arbor campus, and it's like if you could get $10 for every black person you saw, or just non-white person you saw, you know, especially in 2006-07, you may walk away with like $100. You know what I'm saying? Now, Michigan State, you may end up with like about $500. Eastern Michigan, you'd hit the you'd hit the cha-ching. You know what I'm saying? So that's what was so disturbing about that, because I'm like, nothing has been right set by this. Why is this institution taking so much of a action on this Prop 2 thing when you clearly don't see diversity in this institution?
Well, I mean, the U of M itself didn't want Prop 2 to happen, right? Like they were trying. U of M has tried everything in the book to try to be able to admit non-white students. And every time they try something, they get sued. And Prop 2 was just like the nail in the coffin, because admissions for black students plummeted the next year, and we have not regained, where we were. So I mean, it's been tough ever since, for over a decade now. But it's not for lack of trying by the admissions offices, by the administration itself. Like they want black students, but yeah, like you said, there's still a very strong conservative bent among students, among some faculty, and yeah, it leads to lawsuits every time.
And it's so unique too, as you speak about that, because I grow older, and now I get more white homies, and then I hear the stories about, my sister's had a 4.0 her whole life, and I heard it's like a guy from, a city in Detroit that had a 2.5 and a felony, and he's getting in, and I'm like, is this real? You know what I'm saying? Like, is this real? Like, and then furthermore, I used to think that way, but now I'm gonna even lean in and say, okay, let's say that is real. As your white sister with a 4.0 her whole life already has so many other societal advantages, white privilege, that if this consideration in this institution and nobody ever walked on U of M's campus and felt as though you were walking in the Def Comedy Jam, so it's like, I don't know if his or her the black student is quote unquote taking away this scarce resource, though I know admissions is a certain amount and everything. It's a multitude of other opportunities for the white student. Well,
not only that, one, those kinds of anecdotal stories are not the norm, right? But what people fail to realize is that you get points. Like there's a point system on the application, right? Like you get points for if your family members are alum. You get points if your family members have donated significantly to the institution. You get points for art, for music, for other like extracurricular activities. There's all these other things you get points for. No one complains about those, right? It's not that same person with the 4.0 whose dad probably went to Michigan, which is why they want to go to Michigan. They get points for that. Let's remove those too. Let's see how people begin to fare once you take away some of these other privileges that people get. So race as a consideration. One, it makes the classes more robust. It actually makes the learning better. So I teach at U of M now. I taught my first semester in the winter, and when I look at what a majority white class is, a 15 student seminar, what the non-white students were able to bring in terms of perspective and life experience and commentary, it makes the discussion and the learning more robust. So the people who are like, yeah, we essentially want an all-white institution, you are limiting the learning that happens in that space.
And you definitely just gave a heck of an argument. Like I'm also, as a Walsh College graduate, extremely conservative and Republican doctoring and thinking, but love the business school. My dad went there in that same like legacy thing.
Yep.
But it's, and I'm sure definitely my theories, I had many professors backpedaling and back and forth with all my ideas, you know what I'm saying? During the whole idea of the Home Health Care Act and Obamacare, me and a couple professors were like, every day, like I was looking at, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal just to have talking points of like, all right, all right, you know what I'm saying? I think that can enrich that experience. The same prospect in work sometimes, it's like, give that perspective. But let's go a little deeper into that whole, that the diversity in background and thought opens up a discussion differently. As that discussion opens up, how do you feel that enriches all the other students in there? Because maybe I'm a student in there just thinking I want to go here, get a piece of paper so I can get a job. How is that now opening up their mind a little bit more so that they're more prepared from their college experience.
Well, part of it is just understanding how the world works, right? Like if you've only been in a group of people with a similar perspective, right? Now you have other people from other places that don't look like you, the benefit of diversity, telling you about their own life experiences, their own view of healthcare access, right? Like everybody else may have experienced where, yeah, I've been on my parents' healthcare, and that's just how healthcare works in the United States. Well, what if your parents' job doesn't provide that? Like, what does healthcare access then mean? Having that conversation in a political science course, in a social work course, in a medical school course, like that changes the way that the other students who have experienced privilege most of their life understand how the world works, and begins to allow them to posit differently on how you create solutions for the rest of us, essentially. It also takes a really astute faculty member to be able to facilitate the conversation well. So on the one hand, you need diverse students, but you also need diverse faculty to be able to understand the value that Akari brings to the conversation, being able to say, this is why we do or do not need this policy based on your life experiences, based on what you've seen in your community, in your city, etc. I need to be able, as a faculty member, to be able to value that and, in fact, shift the conversation based on what you've said. So that's what I try to do. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like it absolutely opens people up to new ways of thinking about the world.
So as we're thinking of these new ways of approaching the world,
Mm-hmm.
let's get more in your journey from school. So
Sure.
Law school,
Mm-hmm.
well, bachelor's in law, and hats off to, just, the going through the test alone. Law is interesting. As the great Todd Russell Perkins, love Attorney Perkins, says, it's like a strange bird, because it's based on precedent, it's based on fact, it's based on statute, it's based on law. But it also has a whole lot to do with the makeup of the courtroom,
Mm-hmm.
makeup of the judge, if it is a jury trial, makeup of the jury.
Mm-hmm.
Even to me, I'm big in the layouts and how things are set up. Like court, to me, as a black man, for many reasons, it's even disorienting, like just walking in, approaching the bench, knowing how to talk to the judge, sitting, walking into this room at like 8:30, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Being led in by the bailiff, sitting down probably for like 2.5 hours, the judge walking in, taking a piece of paper, doing this.
It's a strange world.
You,
yeah.
And then turning around, talking a little bit to the bailiff, walking back out. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, damn, can I ask the bailiff, like, yo, man, should I put some more money on my meter, bro? You know what I mean? Like, it's the design of it
Mm-hmm.
alone is it's different.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that as a black man, I think for most Americans.
But think about it. So most lawyers are white. Most lawyers are white men still.
Yes.
Like there's more diversity than 30 years ago, but still the majority is white men. The majority of judges are white men.
Yes.
The majority of legislatures, state legislatures, are white men. The majority of our Senate and House are white men.
Mm-hmm.
So just the structure of law is not, it has not been designed by us.
And then even the stenographers, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
usually a white woman.
Yep.
Bailiffs, more times a white man. The clerks, to get there, you may have a black staff, but the management that's white men as well.
Court administration, so there's a reason that it feels off-putting and weird in that, again, we are not guiding the process, we are not creating the laws, we are not enforcing the laws. Like the structure itself is not created by black people.
And so like that space, like being in that, what led you in that path? When did you say, okay, law school it is? 5
years old. I was five. So this was always an interesting question interviewing for law firms, because they'd be like, well, why did you want to get into law? Well, I have no idea. When I was 5 years old, I don't know if you have one of these, but my parents bought me like this little memory book. It's like for every grade, you're like, who's your favorite teacher? Who's your best friend? What's your favorite color? What do you want to be when you grow up, right? And I said president, lawyer, in that order.
Wow.
I don't want to be president anymore. So that's like, cross that off. But I knew as I got older, right, as I came into political consciousness, I saw Bill Clinton. I saw Jennifer Granholm. I saw Dennis Archer. And I'm like, well, if I'm interested in politics, I need to be a lawyer first. All of the examples, local and national, for me was like, yeah, they're all lawyers. So I guess I got to be a lawyer to run for office one day.
Mayor Kilpatrick for most people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was the kid logic that stuck with me, right? So I went into undergrad. I did poli-sci, knowing that I was going to apply for law school. So like none of this was by accident. Like I knew I was on this path. The path shifted, which is why I'm no longer practicing law. But at the time, at the very least, I knew I would study poli-sci, go to law school. Like I just knew I would work at a law firm for a certain period of time. I had mapped it out in my head. I'm like 5 to 7 years. The goal for me is not to become partner, is to get this experience as a launch pad to something else. And I basically did exactly that. So,
and what type of law?
So corporate and real estate, which is interesting that you talk about the courtroom, because I think I've stepped into a courtroom as the representing lawyer maybe 2 or 3 times in my life.
I would imagine that is a lot of mediation, arbitration, paperwork. Many things are handled outside of that.
Well, mostly it's contract drafting, right? It's negotiation, but a lot of contract drafting, a lot of, transaction management. So making sure that we're drafting the right documents, that we're talking to the lenders, that we're talking to the developers, to just making sure that everything is in order. A lot of paperwork, but I love writing generally. So contract drafting to me was and still is a fun thing to do.
And even getting in that space, as you talk about like the scarcity of us in that space.
Oh yeah.
It's even fewer and fewer.
Ain't none of us there. Yeah. And a lot of times we do exactly what I did, right? Like a lot of us will be at a firm for really 3 to 5 years. By the time like you're a middle level associate, that's when people begin to go on to other things. So even today, and this recently, in the last few months, I was brainstorming with another lawyer friend who's also in the transactional law space, and we were trying to think of Black real estate lawyers in Metro Detroit, because this particular lawyer can give work to other lawyers. So she was trying to think of like, who are the Black lawyers? The list is so short.
I'm working with one now in a family matter. I know of 3 others, but leading up to this family matter, it was so weird because I was like, damn, every one of these, it's like y'all are introducing me to, I got more Chaldean real estate attorneys, and I'm like, nah, we need a Black person because we need to be culturally, and this is big in where I come from. Cultural competency needs to make sense, especially with fam, because sometimes we're gonna say something and we need a person, even if they're fair, we need you to cut in and say, look, I need this today, straight up, square business. And then we understand. So we're not going through like 2 levels of communication, 2 levels of connection, 2 levels of everything. And this real estate law space, the more that I found out through helping in family sell property and buy property, boy, the real estate law space, I was very ignorant. And I consider myself pretty bright, but
unless you've dealt with specifically that area of law, like you just wouldn't know, right? And it's also the level of expertise, right? So like buying and selling property is one level. Dealing with a larger development transaction, right? So dealing with the lenders, dealing with all of their attorneys, dealing with that's a different level, right? And then you get up to like
coding inspections,
but like industrial, large infrastructure, like you keep getting more and more complex, and the higher up you go, that the levels of complexity, the fewer and fewer of us you see.
You get zoning compliance, You get if you have a person like mixed use dwellings and dealing with matters of like a person fulfilling whatever the obligation of their consideration of needs and stuff, and it's like, damn, this is like it makes sense. And then also like a lot of other stuff now, as I'm learning from my ignorance, it's like, yep, this should be notarized, this should be that way. But the reality of a lot of stuff in the city of Detroit, just due to lending practices, in my opinion, being very biased, is it's a lot of wild, wild west out here.
It is
so many quit claim deeds.
Let me tell you. So that comes up in class, and I always have to like explain to people, you get no protection with a quit claim deed, right? And yeah, I mean, it is the wild, wild west out there.
And just even cleaning a deed.
Yep.
Of like possibly workman's liens that people may not even know. You know what I'm saying? This person put some janky windows in your house, and it's like, I ain't paying you the rest of that, and now you got a lien on your house, you don't even know.
Or, I mean, federal tax liens and all kinds of other judgments and claims. Like, people have no idea what's on their title.
Yes.
Like, no idea.
But even the access to the right attorney to even, you know, looking into your title, getting title work done, an attorney that knows how to do that, and then also you still have the system of, you're still dealing with municipal government, so sometimes sometimes that can be a little bit.
That could be a whole podcast to itself. Like,
yes. So what we're talking about, for everybody watching right now, we've definitely hit a turn, and we're talking real estate. And you guys need to pay attention. Don't get drowsy or nothing. This is very important, because so many people right now, as I'm pulling a pin out, things have shifted in this city from being such a black home ownership stock to so many renters. And the standards of how people are keeping properties that are rented to, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And then even the onus and obligation in what you have as a renter, it's a tough position, because I mean, you can sit in, you know, you can sit in 3rd District Court almost most days if you want to view most hearings, and you'll see hearing after hearing after hearing after hearing after hearing, and none of this is ever going to represent the person that's the renter.
Now, we do now have access to attorneys for those who are
facing eviction. And
so
we know that through the city of Detroit, the act of Sugar Law Firm. Shout out Tanya, but also Mary Sheffield, City Council. So Sheffield, Tate, I think Romero was heavy in this, and Letitia Johnson were heavy in this. But that's key. But it's fighting this battle. But that battle is, for most people, I don't know if they even know.
I mean, it's new, so yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see how how the institutions you just cited, right, the City of Detroit and Sugar Law Center and others, are able to get that information out to people who need it when they need it.
And then for programs like that, and I'm not even trying to be a pessimistic person, because I was telling someone I'm really very optimistic about a lot of things, even in shifts, because I think, as they say, yin and yang. Times of crises present more opportunities. You don't want to go through crises, but it creates opportunity points. Funding for that program, because these attorneys aren't working pro bono.
That's right.
That's going to be limited. But when we think of right now, the renting class of people in the city of Detroit is so vast, it's so abundant.
So it's a good question. Will there be ongoing funding? You know, how many people will be able to access it? The quality of the attorneys, like who are the attorneys representing the renters who are seeking their counsel? Like, I still have tons of questions, but I also haven't really been able to do a deep dive into the legislation itself. So I'm also hopeful. Again, knowing everyone that you just cited, that, you know, that there will be some bumps as we go, but hopefully that this becomes something that's both robust and that can last, because it's always been needed.
So more from a general perspective, as a city right now has transitioned from like an ownership class to a rental class, what impacts on quality of life does that have in most communities? Like, what's the perspective?
I mean, people are more at risk, right? So rents have begun to rise in some neighborhoods, and well, we know that we're still a city where the level of poverty is higher than most other large cities in the United States. Even subtle changes in rental amounts can cause catastrophic impacts for families, right? So we're beginning to see that, and we're not seeing a shift in or a rise in people's incomes at the same rate. So although these things are happening slowly now, as we've seen we're in a housing crisis in every single city in the nation. Like in no city can you rent a 2-bedroom apartment on a minimum wage job, which you used to be able to do, right? So like the affordability problem is not just a Detroit problem; it's a nationwide problem. So, I mean, we don't have enough housing units. So when you have supply as low as it currently is, you're going to have rental issues. You're going to have even purchasing homes. We're seeing that the cost of homes in the city have risen dramatically in the past 2 to 3 years. So, I mean, on both sides, home ownership and rental, prices are rising. And in a cash-strapped city, that's dangerous.
So let's get into really what you do from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Development yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When did you hit a turn and say, I need to be in this space to be grounded? What was the catalyst from that?
So most of the clients at the firms that I worked for, most of the clients did not look like us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, we talked about like white men creating the structures, but most of the developers at the time were also white men. And I was in my 20s when I first started practicing, and certainly by the time I was 30, it had clicked for me, right? I'm in a 90% black and brown city, yet almost all of our clients who are doing these larger developments are white. Like something in this ecosystem is wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, I was probably a 5th year, and the only project that I can remember, at least, that had black investment in it was the Meyer project at 8 Mile and Woodward. Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to work on that project, and I don't even remember at what level the black investors were investing. I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but one of them, he was also an attorney. He just sort of made a side comment one day. Like, we were walking through the Renaissance Center, and he's like, "Listen, you don't want to be a lawyer your whole life. Like, your goal should be to be the developer." Mm. And it wasn't a long conversation, but like that comment that he made just stuck with me. So, long story short, a few years later, I quit, and I started an organization called Building Community Value. So this is the nonprofit side, right? So I started an organization called Building Community Value, and essentially what we do is we teach real estate to other Detroiters. Like, so folks who want to, buy the house across the street or that small commercial property on the corridor, like, we teach people how to do that. But at the same time, I couldn't be facilitating a program without actually doing it myself. So I had seen it on the legal side, and lawyers will tell you they feel like a development is theirs just because they worked on it. So like when I talk about the Meyer, I talk about it like it was my development project, right? Or Broderick Tower downtown. But being a lawyer on a deal and being the developer on a deal are just night and day different. So I needed to get that experience myself. And so soon after starting the nonprofit, I also started a for-profit venture to also do real estate development myself. So both of those things sort of happened at the same time.
What was the first? So in twofold. Mm-hmm. First, let's go to who were the first people that entered in your class? Who was interested in that information? So,
shout out to U of M. The class started before Building Community Value started. So there was a professor at the business school who essentially has been teaching real estate for 30 years. Mostly to students at the business school, so mostly white students, right? Mm-hmm. And for him, he's like, black Detroiters, he's a white professor. Black Detroiters deserve to understand this information too. So he got a free class at the U of M Detroit Center. This was 2015. Free class at the U of M Detroit Center. He got some support from the School of Social Work to sort of manage the course. and they put out an application to Black Detroiters like, we're going to have this class. Yeah. 2016, I start my nonprofit. They reach out to me and they said, hey, we think this training should live at your organization. Like everything that I was saying about BCV, they were like, this aligns. And we think, because the professor didn't want to teach the class for the rest of his life. He's like, he wanted to seed an idea. He wanted to create the structure and then hand it off to a community partner. So I created the structure as a new community partner, and they were like, here's the baby. We hope it grows. So, I mean, most of the participants are residents of Detroit, Hamtramck, or Highland Park, and most folks are Black or brown.
What type of, like, were older, younger, people
all over
starting
the map.
families, single?
No, so are
people looking to make money? People like, look, I'm trying to flip houses, as they say.
It really is across the board. So our youngest folks are usually in their early 20s, and the oldest are usually in their 70s. Wow. So like it really does.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
That's definitely from like Duke Ellington to Babyface Ray.
There you go. Which is a beautiful thing actually, to see how people interact with one another and how their life experiences show up in class. But we certainly do have people who are very community focused, who are like, I'm in it because, you know, I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I've seen it deteriorate. I want to bring it back. Like, there's certainly that perspective. Usually it's not people who are in it just for the money. Oftentimes there's a wealth building aspect, but it's for legacy. It's like, yo, I got my 5-year-old daughter. I want to leave her something when she grows up. Like, usually that's the frame that people come into the class with. But there is this tension, and I think it's purposeful on our part, on who we allow into the course, but it's beautiful how it shows up. Like, there are people who are like, we want to keep rents affordable. Like, the reason that we're in the class is we want to buy that house across the street. We want to keep rents affordable. We want our neighbors to be able to afford the space. There are the other people who are like, I want a 10% return because I'm trying to build wealth, right? The conversations that happen around those two different philosophies, actually, to the point earlier of diversity, everybody Black, or almost everybody Black in the class, but the different philosophies and actually, background and thought, create a different, more robust conversation in class. Often what happens with the person who wants the affordability, though, is that they'll do an economic analysis of the deal. Like, we don't want people to lose their money, right? What's happening now is that you can buy a property cheaply in Detroit still in certain neighborhoods, or you can get a land bank property cheaply. But once you're in it, people don't realize that it might cost $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to bring the house back.
If that, and then also for those watching, because Detroit is one of those places, especially for my people not from Detroit, it's like you can buy a house for like $100. All right, now, and I have some feelings about that. And we did a good podcast that T-Bar posted. September Ingram was there. Attorney Anthony Adams was on that too. So I have some feelings about some of this stock, but you also have the elephant in the room of you have large investment groups that have bought like neighborhoods worth of homes and bought like massive crews worth of contractors, but and occupied some of the best property management groups. Like, they've commoditized the market to even buy a home in Detroit in certain ways, in my opinion, from what I've seen and witnessed, even in my own neighborhood. Where, and it makes sense because, you know, supply and demand, it meets, like, you know, if I do roofs and this one company's like, hey, you want to do 60 roofs, or do you want to do that one family's roof? Like, it ain't even a thought process.
That's right.
It's like, I'm not even going to Menards right now. I'm going directly to where Menards buys their shingles. And I'm like, look, I need, 5 shipping containers full of
Because can I keep my crews busy for months?
Yeah.
Right. Because like if you're trying to, doesn't matter if you're black, white, or other. If you're a contractor or a construction firm, your goal is to keep the work flowing.
Yeah.
Right. And to do the one-off job here or there, for them feels inefficient, and you're not making as much money. Yeah. So when you have like these larger groups that are doing, multiple homes at once, it's like, of course, to them economically, of course I'll do that. Right. For us, however, trying to rehab, my own home or just like that one investment property. Yeah. It's hard to find. It's hard to find people.
Even if you have like 4.
Yeah.
And how does that balance? So I bring that because even if you're looking to get that return on investment for that person that does want to buy the quote unquote, I was reading an article, I want to say, was it the Free Press, about saying, it was in the Free Press, and then I saw it on the news, and it just stood out in my mind, like saying like, housing prices are going up and you can still get a fixer-upper, but fixer-uppers are hard to find. And then what's defined as a fixer-upper? And like what you said, it's the time, value, cost of money, economic concept too. So even if, you have this house, it only needs $20,000 worth of repairs, but due to the scarcity of contractors, especially licensed and bonded contractors that you may have gotten some of that lending for.
If you can get the lending.
If you can get lending.
That's a different, we can get there. Yeah.
Caveat, but we're going on, you got lending. You know what I'm saying? It's like another trick bag of like, well, damn, I got the lending, I got the space, I know the work that needs to be done, but every contractor is like, okay, talk to me in 2023. I may have a spot in spring.
That's right.
And you're looking at the land bank notice of like, okay, you got to make these repairs, or it may end up back in those roles. Like, that's a tough spot for a lot of people.
And it's not just, it's a terribly tough spot. And it's not just for, the single family or duplex rehabber. Yeah. Right. If you're doing a small commercial building, it's the same problem. Yes. Right. One, will construction crews do work in the neighborhoods of Detroit when they can do work on the big deals downtown? And, if they do the work, will they charge you double than what it would have cost, a decade ago, 5 years ago? So no, at all levels, we need more contractors in the city of Detroit, and we don't have the same pipeline that we used to have, right? Or we're beginning to rebuild it slowly, right?
What do you think broke that pipeline? Is that the, you know what I'm saying?
We closed our vocational schools. So I graduated in 2001, and around that time, DPS closed a number of our vocational schools in the city of Detroit. And even now, talking to parents and young folks, there's this. I think it's more prevalent than it was 20 years ago, where parents are like, nah, they're going to university or they're going to college. Like, that's the goal, versus you can make a hell of a lot of money being an electrician, but that's not on the radar. Certainly not of the kid, but of the parents either. So like, there's this whole conversation of what is good employment that I think has also shifted for us. So we have not been building that group of young folks who can take on those roles as other people age out or move out.
And when you have these projects, because you're right, if you can get lending, great. But let's say you're going, like, from your perspective, straight cash.
Most people are doing cash deals.
But cash deals is so, and this is where, as you say, it's like it costs more money to be poor, period. Because, credit to hell, lending options here to hell, and even if everything is good, they're going to quantify, like, based on, this is a Kari Frazier thought process, the appraisals of properties in the city of Detroit, due to the lack of diversity of the actual people that do appraise,
I think it's less grossly. I think it's less than 2% are black.
Grossly wrong, to the point where I'm like, after going through the process, I'm like, I may want to just look into being an appraiser, just to be a black guy that people know that will appraise a property, especially when it's like I saw their process. I'm like, this is Like, we're paying this much and you don't even really know. You're looking at what was sold in my neighbor. You're looking at like a 3-block radius of houses sold. And I live in a community where we know how stuff is in Detroit. You can live 2 blocks away from a $500,000 home, and another home 2 blocks away may sell for 30.
And a lot of times, technology is taking over that role more and more. So in fact, the appraiser is pulling in a lot of data. Like it's not like it was 30 years ago. So no, you're right. Like they need to understand the communities in which they're working, and many of them do not.
Yeah. Every appraiser I looked at for a project, back to another family deal, every one of them, I could not find an appraiser that was not damn near like, the closest one is like, yeah, I always work in Detroit, but it's going to take me about 25 minutes to get down there. I'm like, damn. And you always work here? I'm like, this is the Green Acres appraiser specialist. This is what everybody says I should go to. And I swear this guy lives, if he didn't live on the other side of Hall Road.
All right, I got after the podcast, I got a recommendation for you.
I got you, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I know other people are dealing with this same prospect. So like, I know we're getting into the weeds, but on the flip side of you getting into your deals, what were some of your first deals getting in that space? So
I'm only really interested in commercial.
Okay.
So right now I have 3 projects that are happening pretty simultaneously. 2 on 6 Mile and 1 in Corktown.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that, and I think this is because of building community value, like folks look at me as a housing expert. And yes, I know a lot of data about housing. Like I follow it deeply, but like my personal passion as a developer is commercial.
Okay.
Like when and this has been happening for a long time. Like when I drive up and down our corridors, like I imagine what my parents saw when they got here. Right? Like 6 Mile was bustling. Most of our corridors were, right? And to think about what I've seen sort of stripped away in my lifetime, and certainly what they've seen in their lifetime, it's like, where do we go now to get basic needs? Where do we go for entertainment and for food? Like, how far do we have to travel? And I know this is a car city. I'm probably one of those few. If we had real public transportation, I would give up my car in a heartbeat. But it's just like, can I walk to something? So I live near Wyoming and 6 Mile, so near Marygrove. I'm like, what can I walk to besides the gas station? Right now, we have some things that are popping up on 6 Mile, but it's just like, yeah, I know we hated some the way that people talk about 20-minute neighborhoods throughout the United States, like in urban planning spaces, is a little weird. But like the idea of being able to walk to amenities, like everybody should be able to walk to basic things in their own communities. So that's what I'm trying to build. Like that's what makes me passionate. And I want it to look and feel like it was made for us. I want people to step into spaces. Like I'm excited. Like there's a new restaurant that just opened, Petty Cash on Livernois. Yeah. Like I've seen pictures and I can't wait to go into the space because the way that the pictures that I've seen, it feels like it was designed with me in mind. Yeah, exactly. And I want more spaces like that. You know, I go to restaurants in downtown in the Cass Corridor, and when I walk into some of those spaces, I'm like, I know the food's going to be good, but this atmosphere, the music, just the colors, the materials like that are used in the design, I'll never forget. I work with one architect, Black architect based in Detroit, and the first project we started working on, he put out like 100 photos for me and my partner to go through. And he's one of these, like some architects are very like code thinkers and like math thinkers. And there are some architects who are like artists. And to me, he's almost like the artist kind, right? So he put out 100 photos and he wanted me and my partner just to go through and pick photos of what we wanted the space to feel like. And he was like, it could be color, it could be design, it could be smell, it could be just like whatever the photos like evoked for us. And me and my partner separately were picking photos and we put them up on the wall, and I looked at his, I looked at mine, and I'm like, all right, we picked the same similar, like it looked like a black space, right? Like a sexy black space. And I'm just like, all right, that's what we want to create. But you need black people in the room to create it. Because a white person or not a non-black person can say that they want to welcome black people into their establishment, but will they know? Actually, shout out to Rosa and to Charity Dean, who just created the coffee shop on Grand River. She and I have had this conversation about the nature of design and what it signals to your customers, right? Even the music, like your playlist means something. When I walk in and if I hear Anita Baker, I'm like, I'm supposed to be here.
And I this kind of likens itself to some of the discussion that I was saying about like courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
Design has a lot.
It's
like,
huge.
It's design changes our behavioral
without us knowing it.
Exactly. Like it's a reason why the Catholic, you went to Catholic school, the Catholic cathedrals have such high ceilings.
Yep. There's no utility to it. Yeah.
A certain way.
That's right.
Walking in a place with a 600-foot high ceiling, it makes you feel like I'm so small. In courtrooms have this feeling sometimes, like the larger the courtroom setting and things, like, you know, jails, for all of my friends that have spent time like in social design, of like most cells have a window that you can't see out of. Sun's coming in.
Yep.
But you can't see out of it. Which psychologically does something to your mind of like, I know it's an outside that exists, but I can't even see it.
And when you're talking to people about structural racism in terms of space, this is the hardest, one of the hardest conversations. So the current chief storyteller of the city of Detroit, Eric Thomas, wrote a piece, I don't know, a year or two ago, just about what it feels like to be black in certain spaces. And I've seen a number of these pieces that have come out lately too. When you are trying to describe to a white business owner why something feels bad to you as a black person being in a space, you can't quantify it, right? And if you can't quantify it, it's hard for anybody else to buy into or to like really respect your opinion. So, I mean, black development to me, and it's a very broad phrase, right? Like, not every black person thinks the same way. Not everyone feels the same way in space, but having the conversation and having similar social cues, like you can have that conversation with a black business owner. And I really want people to start thinking about how you feel in space. Like when you walk into a space, what's your body doing? Like, are your shoulders tense? Like, how are you feeling in that space? Because there really are some things happening in Detroit that, again, without us knowing it, impact us psychologically.
It's deep that you said that. One of my big mentors and a heck of a thinker, Mama Annette, Dr. Gloria House, in like, I want to say like the mid 80s, she wrote a piece, a book. It's not even published anymore. She was like, if you can find that book, let me know, on specifically landscapes and their impact on things. Because I know even colleges, it's a reason the big lawn in front of the institution. You know, it's a reason why when we go to schools like, you look at a school like Interlochen or Cranbrook, the design of the campus versus a school like, shout out, you know, I'm a Northwestern guy, but Northwestern High School, but like as you see the design of it, the concrete all around of it, it has a similar, you know, locked up kind of
that's right
core to it. And then you look at a Cranbrook and it's just like open with, you know, design bushes and trees and, you know, a lot of classes outside. Like, damn, do this even feel like school? Like, what's going on here? You know what I'm saying? You know, what's the other school? Wardolph, it does certain things like that when we think of the design of just the place itself. And looking a certain way does orient a certain behavior, which, as you said, psychologically, some of these things orient other things. Because like even the littering, I think it's a certain, you know, we live in certain neighborhoods, like even my block, like the illegal dumping that used to always happen. Now, since I've activated more of my space, put the tires out, put plants and stuff. I'm not saying nobody will illegally dump at all, but it changes your orientation, because it's like, damn, what's going on over here?
Mm-hmm.
This looks like, let me go. I don't want them to go 2 blocks over and do it, but let me go 2 blocks over and do it, because this don't seem
this looks
like
too
the
nice,
place.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And eat all of these behavioral things, as people were saying, like blighted communities impact things, like the house on my corner, like we've blocked, and I've paid for the barricade, the guy across the street paid to barricade it, but probably maybe like twice a month somebody's going in there and they need to squat and rest. But when they squat and rest and they leave out, they don't close back up, and now it creates a danger.
That's right.
It's a certain way, like certain things like that impact our community in certain ways. And I don't know psychologically what it may have, those long-term impacts on us, but also those places where we don't feel welcome. I think it has the same impact. Like sometimes even my white friends hate when I say this, but like even I go into certain parking lots because I know those cars that black folks gonna drive. So it's just just the running joke. If I see, if you're in the suburbs and you see a parking lot full of like a bunch of F-150s, it's like, I know the type of bar I'm into. Whereas you go in a parking lot and you see a bunch of Cadillacs and Benzes, it's like, I know the type of bar I'm going into.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Even that plays, a role in design and where things are at.
But what worries me about the nature of communities where we are losing, or we have lost much of the beauty that was there. And again, a lot of that is structural. We can talk about foreclosure and the loss of homes, etc. But the loss of beauty. I was driving up Finkel, I don't know, a few days ago, and there were 3 kids walking down the street through a very deserted, blighted stretch of Finkel. And it made me think of my niece, who's pretty young as well. And I'm just thinking to myself, what do they think they deserve? Right? If this is their life, like, I don't know if they get out of their neighborhood, right? But like, this is my thinking, right? If this is what they see every day, right? And I know adults, young adults in their 20s, who, if they go into a nice restaurant, feel very uncomfortable. This is not for me, right? So I'm wondering, seeing these young kids, if they don't see beauty in their own communities, will they think they deserve beauty as adults? So, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I think this impacts us, right? And I want these kids growing up now, like, this is my concern, right? So I've seen what we've lost over my nearly 40 years now, and I want these new kids, these younger kids, to see all of the new stuff, like the beauty that's being created for them, so that when they are my age, they're like, yeah, like Detroit, just like, we just kept seeing stuff open all the time. Like, there's these black entrepreneurs and developers who were just like opening businesses in our community. Like, that's what I want them to see, so that they don't think they need to leave Detroit to succeed.
So when you say things like that, that naturally triggers most people to say, wow, I got a project, I got a business, I want to meet Chase, I want to be there. How do you decide who to partner with for the visions? So
I think the beautiful thing for me is that building community value allows me to do that. It's my day job, right? Like, the development is actually like the side hustle. So BCV is the day job. So when we have classes for real estate, we have office hours, etc. So when people are interested in understanding how this works, I'm able to provide a structure, right? It's like, hey, take this class. Hey, come to office hours. There's a structure to talk about those things. Now, I am not a build institute, right? I'm not a tech town, right? Like, I am focused on the built environment, not on like the business development entrepreneurship side. And that's not my specialty either, right? On the legal side, yeah, like, I can help people. When I was practicing, I could help people start a business, right? I can get the entity set up. I could do the operating agreement, etc. But even as a developer, I don't want to operate the space, right? So people have been saying for the first 6 Mile project, they're like, yeah, Chase's brewery. I'm like, this is not my brewery. Like, I built the building and the brewery's the tenant, right? So I want people to get to know Brian, who runs the brewery, right? I don't want to be an operator. Like, that's never my goal. It's not my expertise. But I love talking about real estate, and I can talk about it all day.
How do you pick your tenants? Because that, I mean, being connected in a community, and just due to back to that, I'm gonna harken on that term, scarcity. Just the scarcity of us in spaces like that. Now I can only assume the pitches of like, hey, my cousin got an African cotton candy.
We
you know what I'm saying?
I have a project that for that cousin. But really it's conversation, right? Like I'm in conversation with people every single day, right? So part of, I don't know, it's not just a skill, it's just sort of innate within me, is to be a connector. Like, I'm always connecting people. Like, I'm meeting people all the time, and I'm connecting people all the time. So when it comes time to figure out what's the group of tenants that could possibly be in a space, I already have like a list in my head, right? Because I already know that a lot of people have told me, yo, I'm interested in XYZ. It's like, okay, I can curate these certain things in the space, and they work together. So what I really want to do, and what I'm working towards, is we don't have enough flexible retail space in the city of Detroit, right? Like, if there's a lot of spaces where, you know, someone's taken over 1,000 square feet for, you know, let's say a clothing store, when they really only needed like 300 square feet. So they have the extra expense to try to get people in the door, to pay the rent, because they probably don't own the building, because most people are renting, even in the commercial space. There are other communities that have truly large, I mean, there's flea markets, there's other like retail markets that Detroit really doesn't have, which is crazy to me, because this is the city where everyone has a side hustle, right? Everybody selling t-shirts, everybody like got something they selling, but we don't have places for that. Like, you have to be an established business, you know, you have to go through a business incubator, and you need to rent like a really big brick and mortar. That doesn't work for most people. So what I'm hoping is that we can get more retail spaces that are flexible, smaller spaces, so that people who, you know, they get off at 5 from one job and they want to sell from 5 to 9, they can have a space to do that. So that's the next project.
So conceptually, and I think projects like that can work with the right synergy.
That's right.
You know,
but again, I don't want to be an operator. So so I know that there are people in Detroit, you know, who can operate those kinds of spaces, who are already doing that kind of work.
I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. I would think of my podcaster comes to mind, the great Jennifer Crawford.
I may have been thinking about Jennifer, and that. So yeah.
I think of her immediately when it comes to stuff like that.
Exactly.
But it's other people in that space too.
Yep.
Because you're right. Like just what that is and what's needed. I was in a new shop. What is their brand? The Plug is the brand, and it's like on the corner of Broadway, and it's basically next to where Burt's on Broadway used to be.
Okay.
For kind of, I'm about to. It's like across the street from where the network used to be, but that corner.
Yep.
And it's a retail space, and like you say, like when I'm thinking like, yeah, more stuff could be done here, but what's the equity in that, like in that project? So in that, I'm sure, so you're dealing with relationships that have already been cultivated, people that you've seen do what they do. If I'm a person that has a brand new idea, how do I even approach it?
So in that case, it really is, I mean, in the same way that there's building community value, there's capital impact partners, they have their equitable development initiative, all that's for real estate. I mean, there's the Build Institutes and others for like entrepreneurship. So that I mean, it really is those programs that really do offer the kind of support that businesses need to get started.
And then at that same capacity, just knowing for the average person that doesn't have a space, how they even judge what's fair rent commercial in the commercial space.
They need to talk either to a real estate broker or to a real estate lawyer. Like, honestly, like, you need to be reaching out to professionals. I have seen, and this was mostly pro bono, right? Like, folks who have gone through Motor City Match, I won't make commentary about the program, but they've gone through Motor City Match. You know, they then get linked with a property owner. Mm-hmm. Property owner presents the lease, and people don't always go through the process of talking to a broker or a lawyer about that lease. And I've seen some of these leases which are horrendous, right? So it really is, if you're looking for space, if you really want to rent space, you have to have professionals who understand the market.
Mm-hmm. So going into that, even before you explore your business,
mm-hmm.
because I think that's oftentimes, even when it comes to personal rent, that's how people think. They think, you know, I make $4,000 a month. They charge me $1,200 of rent. That's cool because I still got $3,800. I can live with that, which is like more like, it's definitely like a linear way of thinking,
mm-hmm.
but it's not the business way of thinking.
That's right. And to the same extent that we have people do a pro forma for real estate, like you need to have a detailed business plan if you're an entrepreneur opening a business, right? So yeah, you want to understand how much that rent is, but you also need to understand, you know, your material costs and all the other things that you need to run your business.
Utilities are included.
Yeah.
And then also, because certain utilities probably you gonna need internet.
Mm-hmm.
But the capacity of just even, you know, sometimes stuff like that. You know, how long will it take to, you know, as here go another one. Man, my mind just went blank for a second, but he always speaking about white box spaces and what a white box space looks like, and
mm-hmm.
he just straight up said there is no such thing as a white box space in the city of Detroit. Oh man, this is gonna kill me. Mr. Simply Casual was always saying that. He's like, look, you just gotta, Mr. Rufus Bartell would be like, there is no white box space in Detroit. You're going to have to white box the space for whatever your business is too, because that's the functionality. Like when I think of operating the space, if you talk about operating the space, I've run 2 studios, one in Southfield, one in Eastern Market before, like my space and other spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Big learning curves. Rent was not so steep, so it was manageable. But even though rent was manageable, all the other things included of having an open space was tough.
Mm-hmm.
Operating this house can be tough in where things go because it's a lot of other responsibility and liability that comes in operating a space where the public will interface.
That's right.
And that's even getting the space ready for you. So, you know, how long do you think the average tenant is probably going to even have to wait to get that space ready?
It depends.
To begin selling.
It depends on a lot of factors, right? Like it depends on if your landlord has thought of those things ahead of time, right? It depends on what's already included in the lease, like you said, right? If the landlord has already thought about bringing internet to the building, bringing internet to the space, if utilities are included, like if it's gross rent, right, everything's in the rent, then it's much easier, right? But to Rufus's point, right, that's not most spaces in Detroit.
No.
So it's super dependent on what space that you land in, because some spaces will take a lot of work for a tenant to even get to open the door.
Which let's go into people's favorite want to business. And it's funny because I'm from business school, so they always say, it's like everybody want to open a bar and a restaurant, and chances are it's gonna fail.
Which 100% true, and those are the hardest businesses to open.
And I was going to get into that because it still also involves a lot of inspections, zoning, coding. You know, the difference between your sink being here and here could not have your restaurant open, and it also could possibly be a $45,000 problem.
And the health department will tell you what needs to be fixed, and there will be no mercy. It will be like, the sink needs to be 5 feet over there. Sorry, you just have to fix it. Yeah, we've had some
I mean,
some experiences.
But we're talking real here.
Yeah.
So now you're paying. You're talking to the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying you money. I told my mama, my grandma, my best friend from high school, hey, I'm opening September 30th.
And you'll end up opening in March, you know? No, this is real. There's always going to be a delay. There's always going to be a delay. On the developer side, right? Like if you're, I mean, most of these buildings are in bad shape, right? So like you have to bring them up to code in the first place. Then you get a tenant. It's gonna take some time, because by the time you get through, the business environment in the city of Detroit is extremely challenging. On the developer side, on the entrepreneur side, just getting through all the processes to meet the requirements that the city puts in place. We have lost some of our inspectors in terms of capacity. There's been turnover. There's been some loss of institutional wisdom at the city. So to get through some of these processes can be daunting. So even if you, as the entrepreneur, are on top of everything, like to actually make sure that you get the response that you need, that you can keep that city staff member engaged, that you can actually shepherd your request through the process in any kind of timely manner, like there's going to be a delay. Even if you have done everything right, there will be a delay.
And now as we talk about delay, I want to talk about some of those deep wounds from some entrepreneurs. One of the biggest deep wounds from a lot of people, this was kind of us. We didn't leave much at one of our spaces. We left a stage and we left some speakers because they were just so hard to move out. It just was like, man, forget those speakers, forget the stage. That happens often too, especially in the restaurant business, where whole kitchens just get left in properties that people don't own because they need to leave a space. Rent goes up.
Yep. They need to leave a space. And again, this is why you need to have a savvy real estate attorney, right? It's like what kinds of fixtures become the property of the landlord, and what kinds of fixtures can you take with you? And unless you've negotiated that up front, a lot of times, I mean, you will do a build out, and I mean, this should be spelled out in the lease. At the end of the lease term, what happens? What happens to everything in that space? That's why people need not just any lawyer. And I have to tell my students this all the time. Don't just get any lawyer who thinks they know how to do real estate. You specifically want someone who only practices real estate law. Because those are the kinds of things that you need to see in those documents.
Because it happens often.
Yeah.
And it's sad that I've seen people put a restaurant's worth of equipment in a space that they got to walk away from, and now they're trying to operate pop-up style. And
they probably took out a loan to buy the equipment in the first place, right? So like the loss of capital and all of that is real.
And I think it's very commonplace too. And that's such a tragedy. So how do you even, like, is some of this, I mean, I guess, you got personal and you got business. Can some of this stuff shift? Like, are you looking for a tenant to, okay, if you are a tenant, are you looking for a landlord you can have a good relationship, a good rapport? Like, definitely you still want your lawyer.
So the good relationship and rapport are important for a number of reasons, right? Like, you want your landlord to be responsive. Like, if something goes wrong in the building, you want your landlord to be responsive. So that good relationship is important. But having a clear understanding is the most important thing. Whether it's a good landlord or not, having that document that clearly spells everything out. Like, a good commercial lease is at least 30 or 40 pages, honestly. They're painful to draft. But, I mean, they really do spell out everything. Who's paying for utilities? Who's paying for taxes? Who's paying for repairs? What fixtures are whose? Who's paying fees and fines to the city? Everything. Everything is spelled out. And a lot of times people are signing 10-page leases, and that's it, right? So when the problem happens, there's no clear understanding between them and the landlord. It's better to be able to say, like, on page 47, section 23C4, like, it says, I get to take this with me. So,
and then for people that are interested, when do you, for a person being, I guess, being an entrepreneur, you're always too ambitious. When would you say a business is ready to make that jump and move to a commercial space?
Well, again, it depends on, what kind of commercial space. There's some spaces that are flexible, right? Where you, again, are able to do You know, it depends on what you're selling or what service you provide, but where you're in there with other entrepreneurs, which I think people should start in flexible spaces where there's a low barrier to entry to test the idea, to test the product, to test whether it even makes sense, if there's a demand for what you're selling, before you get to the point where you're actually getting your own brick and mortar by yourself. Because you should have already proven your idea to yourself, right? And if you have investors or lenders, family, friends, you know, who have put money into the business, you need to know that there's a client base. You need to know that your service or product is wanted before you make that real big leap to say, I'm going to get into a 3 to 5 year lease for my own space. Like, you really need to have proven that concept first.
Definitely. So yeah, man, it's you've dropped so much game, and I'm gonna have to get you back because
I happy to show up anytime.
Many more questions I have in reference to this. I know we spoke on homes and definitely went in commercial. To me, they're definitely different, but they're interrelated when we think about that. Now, from the commercial space, you said that it's almost, because I know more so from the home side, but commercial buildings are being brought up in mass groups by property investment companies as well.
Not like homes. A lot of the ownership of commercial spaces, in fact, is legacy, right? Yeah. There have been people or families who have moved out decades ago, but who retain ownership of commercial space in Detroit, and have just let the spaces like deteriorate. When I walked into, so it's 7400 West McNichols, 6 Mile, but 7400 West McNichols. When we walked into the building, I mean, everything you could imagine, right? The roof was caving in, water, damage everywhere. There was asbestos in the building, dumping, like everything. And I'm just like, so this owner left this vacant for a decade plus. Everyone who has touched it since, because we bought it from a bank. Everyone overpaid for it, so we had to overpay for it. But just like, that's what people want. People are waiting for their cash out. They're like, well, we've held on to this for 10, 20 years. Now that X neighborhood is coming back, we're trying to get this for we're trying to sell it for $200,000, $300,000 when it's only worth 20, right? We almost had to rebuild that building, honestly. Like, we replaced much of the back facade, the front facade, the roof joists. Like, we replaced everything. And that's most of the buildings in the city. And what's more is that you can't just go to a bank. How to explain this? So you can't go to a bank for the cost of construction and then believe that your building will be worth what you put into it, right? You put in $1 million, it's only going to be worth $700,000. You know, you put in $3 million, it's only going to be worth $2 million, right? So we're automatically underwater, which is why people are up in arms about Dan Gilbert won that $60 million tax abatement. Let's not talk about Gilbert. If you're doing development in the neighborhoods, every single building has a tax abatement, right? Every new shiny building that's opening has a tax abatement, because you cannot make the numbers work without abatements, you know, strategic neighborhood subsidies. If you're doing housing from MISHDA, if you're doing just commercial from the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, there's so much subsidy going into all these projects to make them work. So we put in $3 million. The building is not worth $3 million. When we are done, so we hand the keys to the tenants in a month. When we hand the keys to the tenants, we have put in $3 million. An appraiser is going to come in and say it's not worth that.
Yeah.
That's every single commercial building on most of our corridors, right? So we don't have enough subsidy to even bring these buildings back. Like, there's a limited amount. So it's a struggle given the nature of the buildings, given the capital that's available. It is extremely difficult to actually make these commercial buildings work.
It's unique that you speak to that, because I had almost a cousin that old enough, he was like an uncle that was really into real estate. And I always looked at real estate more as it's like a long-term game.
Yeah.
I always thought real estate is like 15, 20, 25 year type thing. The people that I've seen in my mind have the most success with it. But really, these are like almost like 25 years. You're going to be successful at whatever you do. You know what I'm saying? But especially with real estate, it's not a quick flip. And that's what was so unique around that time of 2008, 2006, 2007. Like, I was seeing people my age, like, yeah, I'm flipping houses now. And I'm like, word? You know what I'm saying? And now I'm seeing sort of that kind of come back again where I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know interest rates will rise, which they have now. And this is going to impact, you know, how homes are being bought.
Well, it's a cycle, right? And no one can think that real estate, really any asset, but real estate especially, will keep going up in value in perpetuity, like forever. That's not how economics works, right? So we always hit the cycle, and even sophisticated real estate investors seem to have amnesia because people start making really, really crazy decisions at the top of the market for some reason. But the market will always self-correct or crash. We are in this self-correction, right? So interest rates are going up. I mean, we will start to see a lot of this, you know, these institutional investors who are trying to buy up as much cheap property as possible. These skyrocketing home prices that we've seen, there's going to be an adjustment, right, as the economy shifts. So I mean, we're in this, we're the market sort of reached a peak, and we're beginning to come down.
Now, as you look at some of these institutional investors, specifically in homes, I definitely just want your opinion on it. How do we fix that? And I guess I shouldn't even say how do we fix that. Whose role is it to advocate for that family, that single home buyer? You know, the person that wants to buy one house from the Land Bank Authority, get it fixed up. Like, whose role is that? Is that a government thing?
It is.
Is that a community thing? Is that a businesses and real estate thing? Like,
the community is doing it, right? The community is, we have the advocates in the community, right? If you look at community development organizations, right? So I won't even name them, but I mean, we have CDOs throughout the city, some that have been around forever, some that are newer, but they are advocating for Black Detroit homebuyers in neighborhoods to have access to the single family starter home, right? The Land Bank, their goal is inventory management. And what I mean by that is that they have so many homes still. I think they have about 17,000 now, which is down from some crazy amount that they had before. 17,000 homes. The interim director, who has now become the director, even was quoted in either the Free Press or the News as saying, we don't have enough capital as the Land Bank, as an institution, to manage all of these properties long term, right? The goal is to get them off of the books. So what that means is quick sales. Like, they need to get the inventory down. That is not the strategy for first-time home buyers or, you know, low-income home buyers in the city of Detroit. Like, that's not the strategy that works for most people. And when you have community advocates who are trying to create new structures to get those land bank homes and rehab them and get the financing and get a home buyer in it, the land bank is not always the easiest partner. So it's at the community level, the advocacy is already there. It's a governmental response that we need to see. And honestly, this current administration has not been focused on single family housing, right? We have a lot of affordable housing that's was set to expire. So for those, when housing receives subsidy from the federal government, you have to keep it affordable for a certain period of time. That was expiring for like 10,000 units in the city of Detroit. Okay. So Mayor Duggan.
Let me explain let me go a little bit deeper.
Sure.
The developer won't speak. So let me break this down for you guys. All right. And it's a classic back and forth. I remember Andrea Isom. Well, no. It wasn't Andrea Isom. It was because she represents the mayor, but she used to be on television. And she was speaking to this challenge. Mm-hmm. So you all understand how government subsidies work. And this is why I also argue to a lot of my friends that as much as people talk about America's based on capitalism, it is not straight capitalism in America, because government subsidies really create welfare institutions for, as far as I'm concerned, corporations. Now, as Chase just presented, some of these subsidy-based programs definitely empower communities, but some of them definitely deprive communities too. So like, i.e. NFL stadiums or something, you know what I'm saying? So, developers at certain points in time, especially like when we think of what happened in New York City at one point in time when things hit, New York City went bankrupt at one point in time. Mayor Koch, President Gerald Ford was like, I ain't giving New York no money. You know, that was a reality in New York. So things would happen as for developers, it's like, okay, well, we can give you some subsidies, meaning that you're gonna pay less money, pay less in taxes. You're gonna pay less in taxes. We're gonna basically cover some of these costs, like New York City, or bond this out and give you some money over time. But in exchange, you're gonna allow, of your 100-unit building, 50 of them will be affordable or low-income housing. So those 50 that'll be low-income housing, technically, because it's mixed-use housing, is like, okay, you're going to keep this property up to par. And this will be a 30-year agreement. So for 30 years or 20 years, I'm just saying 30, you're going to keep this in low-income, affordable housing units. So this is kind of where people say, oh, man, you got one of them rent-control apartments in New York or this city or that city. Detroit had many of them. A timetable is ticking on many of those properties. Chase just presented 10,000 of those units
in Detroit
are going off those rolls. So what happens when things go off those rolls is a couple of things start happening. One, closer to those things going off the rolls, you'll see these properties that probably have not had a lick of paint in them in 20 years. These properties will start getting paint. Repaving parking lots, because just the whole interest of knowing that you can maximize the value of where these tenants will stay is about to exponentially go up in a year or two. Now you can refinance. You can get lending against what your property is if you're the person that owns that property or wants to sell that property. Basically, you took money from the government to assist the city or the people, citizens of the land or under the government and now that time transitions, and now this is just a for-profit project. One of the big key things, and man, this is really Alexis Wiley. That's who it was.
Got it. Yep.
Alexis Wiley, that was on the Channel 2 News, but now works in was working with Mayor Duggan at the time, gave a presentation on like, yeah, it was this property right there at the corner of, what's crazy is right behind where U of M Detroit's office was. I forget the name of that property project, but it was just even known as a project where this was definitely ousting out so many of the people that couldn't afford to live there. And the property group was... it was negotiated where certain tenants would be able to stay and certain tenants wouldn't be able to stay. And I remember Alexis stood up and said, we're still going to work with this developer, but now they know how to do business with the city. And I was like, how did this person even in the room still? You know what I'm saying? They were about to kick out, like, I want to say maybe about 120 seniors, just like something gross and grotesque. So I'm giving that to the people playing, so you recognize the way that some of these balances and deals happen. So as these 10,000 units now transition for basically market rate, what happens to those 10,000 renters?
So here's where I can be super critical of the administration often, but they have done work in this space. So they made it a priority to preserve those 10,000 units, right? So this is the juxtaposition between, what's happening in the single family space versus these multi-unit dwellings, these apartment buildings. They wanted to keep as many of those affordable units as possible. So they did negotiate with some of the landlords, et cetera. To date, they've probably maintained about 6,000 to 7,000 of the 10, right? So that's a pretty good track record.
That is.
The city doesn't have, and that's a clear plan that the city put in place. You can Google it. It's been in place for years. Like, they talk about it. Alexis was on TV talking, right? Like, this is something that the city talks about. When you ask them what their single family plan is, there is no coherent plan, right? And there has not been. So that's the difference. It is the majority of housing in the city of Detroit. It's over 75% of our housing is single family, but we don't have a coherent plan for it. So when you say, whose role is it to advocate for, the single family home buyer, it is the government, but our current government doesn't have a clear, coherent plan for the majority of our housing type. It's absurd. It's absurd.
What would a plan like that look like?
So we have subsidy, right? We just got over $800 million in ARPA funding, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have subsidy available to us that we are not applying at the scale that we need, right? So I'll give you an example. The $250 million bond, proposal in that passed 2 years ago, give or take.
Yep.
So we're demolishing 8,000 homes. We are basically boarding up another 8,000. So we're patching roofs, we're securing doors, and we're getting trash out. Like, that's what that money is used for. It's not to rehab the home, right? It's to stabilize it in the hopes that, again, the land bank can sell it and get it off their books. Exactly.
Like, it's like kicking the can on possible what would happen, but then the person that buys that property, it could be like a it's like, what's that, storage wars or something, because it could be they could be walking in a place like when you walk in your building.
Yeah. It's
like they boarded it up, now open it up, and oh man, it's a whole tree growing in my house.
Which is a thing that could actually happen in Detroit. So that's one of the strategies, right? Like, let's just board it up and hope that someone else can pay for the rehab, instead of using the dollars that we have for those infrastructure fixes. So we are putting money towards housing, but it's apartment buildings, it's multi-unit dwellings. It's not to the 1 to 4 units. So what would a plan like that look? It would be shifting some of the dollars that we're using to the actual property type that exists for the majority of Detroiters and the majority of neighborhoods.
And okay, I'm gonna stop right here because I'll be talking all day, because you definitely got my juices going on these thought processes. So, all right, classic Detroit is different class questions. And before we even get there, if people want to get in contact with you, people want to go through the class, how do they reach out? Yep.
So BCV, so Building Community Value, bcvdetroit.org. That's the website. But for me in particular, Chase at bcvdetroit.org.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So now our classic questions. Your very first car, year, make, and model, and what year did you get it?
So 96 Chrysler Cirrus green.
Okay.
And I got it in 2000. Yeah.
Okay. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
And I don't know. Probably to work. Because I was working at Mr. Allen's.
Oh, okay. You got a job at Mr. Allen's? Which one?
In Redford. So
the big Mr. Allen's.
Yeah,
you were like on the showroom floor of Mr. Allen's. So.
And I did decently too with commission.
I could imagine people. You probably sold every color of Air Force One.
Every color
you could think of.
Man, listen. The good day was when somebody came in and was like bought like 6 boxes of white Air Force Ones. Just like, and that used to happen. I'm just like, I don't know what you're gonna do with these, but all right, I just made my commission for today.
All right, I'm gonna take my Detroit black card and I'm gonna say this. And I told this to Dez. So if Dez, you sometimes watch and listen, I'm gonna force you to listen to this. That is a poorly designed shoe. As cool as they are, it's like as cool as they are. That is a poorly designed shoe, because it's like, as cool as it is to like Air Force Ones, like fresh pair, you know what I'm saying, Detroit fireworks, you walking, but it's like you gotta walk flat-footed or they gonna crease. And then Daz would be like, well, they got these crease guards and you can buy. It's like, I gotta buy accessories just to wear a shoe.
That's how they get you.
But it's still, I want to say Air Force Ones may have been like, especially in that era. You said 2000.
Yep.
Oh my God,
that was it. That was the shoe.
Nike, Detroit had to have probably sold more Air Force Ones per capita. probably than any other city. I would love to see the records from like 99 to like 2003. Because yeah, you're right. Buying 6 is like, this is just my summer stock.
That's it. Yep.
My summer stock. Let me get 6 11 and a halves. Because it's like, I know I'm going to be at a party and somebody going to spill barbecue sauce on it. And I'm going to be like,
That's
ruined.
it. That's it.
All right. So, the second question. You're the DJ after the fireworks.
Okay.
Woodward Jefferson, you get to play 3 songs. What songs you playing?
Man. What am I going to play? You're going to have me stuck on this one. Can I name artists or do I have to name the song?
You can name the artist and
All
then I may give you a song.
Man. All right, so I like the vibe of new school musicians who have like throwback music. So like Bruno Mars, like Supersonic.
Okay.
So one of their newer jams. Probably something old school. You heard me talk about Anita earlier. And then man, I feel like an old soul. Probably something by the Isley Brothers.
Okay.
So there we go. So it's all kind of like old school stuff.
So like old school feel.
Yeah.
I'm with it. Yeah. So I would say you said Bruno Mars. I guess 24 Karat Magic would be the song I would pick from him.
All right.
And then you said Anita. We want to get something upbeat, like
that might be hard with Anita because
she doesn't have many of them.
Yeah.
What's that? 365 days of the year. The Same Old Love would probably be that. And then you said the Isleys, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's Fight the Power. So
there we go. Look at that.
I
needed to insist on that, but there we go.
And then, but yeah, the Isleys got such a catalog.
Yep.
And last, you could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Call me Young.
Okay.
Yeah, that's easy. And for me, it's not necessarily what he did politically, even though I think that's super important. But he inspired culturally a whole generation. Like the way that I hear elders talk about him and what he was able to do to spark their imagination of what black people could do and what they could be. Like, again, the politics was important, but that the cultural shift that he was able to create was enduring. So Woodward Avenue becomes, I don't know, Coleman and Young Avenue.
That's what's up. Thank you so much. This was fun. I'm going to definitely get you back because there's more questions as development is key in our city.
Yep. Happy to come back.
It's happening, every place you look up, you're seeing the different crews and homes and definitely in buildings.
Yep.
Not a lot of commercial development inside our neighborhoods, as you said. So that is,
but more than we've seen in decades.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. Certainly. And I tip my hat to you being a young brother in that space because Lord knows, I know it ain't a lot of us in there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.